And so without more ado, I'm going to move now to our first speaker, who is Christoph. He's the CTO and CIO of Swisscom. And as is possibly very fitting, he's going to talk about, welcome Christoph, he's going to talk about the resurgence of infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie, and welcome to everybody from my side as well. It's really great speaking to you this morning. So, as Annie pointed out, I would also like to start with a few pictures from the lockdown in 2020 and the very peculiar situation, as you can see on this slide, with the Swiss Parliament on the right side and probably the busiest shopping street in Switzerland, the Bahnhofstrasse in Zurich, which is usually pretty crowded with people completely empty. And I think you have seen similar pictures in your countries or your capital cities all over the world, something we would have never imagined before 2020. So we can say in retrospect that spring 2020 had a historic impact on life and the economy, as Annie pointed out, and many things have changed. And I think it will be an event that will be remembered for many years to come. And it is still ongoing as I'm speaking right now, again, out of the home office during our second lockdown in Switzerland, with all the shops closed again until end of February. And I think, as it was pointed out before, telecommunications provider had a very special role, or still have a very special role to play during this time, really sort of representing the lifeline of the country, connecting people from to be able to continue to go to school, to allow many businesses to continue to operate out of home offices, or simply to allow people to remain in contact. And in many cases, we were sort of the only road to connect people during this time. And this put our network and services at the center of the attention throughout the whole country. And as a communications provider, I think since many years, we really try to push digitization of the economy and of our SME fabric in the country. And it was sometimes it worked, but in many areas it was also resisted. And what was maybe not surprising, but really nice to observe and see, is how fast finally the society and the country as a whole completely switched to digital when it was really necessary. And in Switzerland, for example, we have seen a doubling of people working out of home from 25 to over 50%. At Swisscom, we had over 80% of our staff working out of home at peak times, and we still have nearly that level of people working from home. And I think we all agree that this is something that nobody would have even deemed possible, that a telecommunications provider has 80% of people working out of their bedrooms or their offices at home, and still having all the networks and services up and running. So with this, I would like to give you some sort of information on our network, as it is really the basis of our talk today and the resurgence of infrastructure. So Swisscom is by far the largest telecommunications provider in Switzerland. And I think during this lockdown period, we also had a lot of attention on our shoulders, and people were actually sort of questioning if the networks were able to cope with the demand and really absorb all the additional traffic coming our way with home office and video conferencing. What might be interesting to point out, in Switzerland, we have a legal obligation to provide at least 10 megabit services throughout the whole country, which is ensured at 100%. The intention of this is to allow everybody, wherever they live, to participate to the digital life and at least be able to do basic services on the internet. And then we go all the way through up to 10 gigabits per second, where about a third of the country is connected through our fiber network, offering 10 gigabit services. Next to this, we obviously also have a great mobile network, but this is not sort of, let's say, at the intention of this talk, which is more focused on the wireline. And now, with regards to all the questioning and whether the networks can actually hold the traffic, I would like to give you some insight how the traffic evolved over time. This, what you see on the chart, is March 2020. This is our core data traffic you can see. And on the if you look at the line at number 1, this is actually the peak usage of our network in normal times. So what is interesting to see is actually working or home office or homeschooling is not the driver of peak usage. It's actually TV load in the evening. So you can see what is really the low piece of the traffic load is during the night. And then it continuously ramps up to have like peak load traffic of about 2.5 terabits per second around 9 p.m. in the evening, where most people are watching TV. The line number 2 is sort of the average load we had around lunch. So you can see a small peak around lunch where I think some people watch TV in front of while they eat. And then sort of usage ramps up gradually during the afternoon to reach the peak at 1 in the evening. The peak next to the one on the left side is actually the Champions League game, the last one on the Tuesday night that was aired before the lockdowns throughout Europe. And then you can see on March 16th, that's where the peak number 3 is. That's when the lockdown was enacted in Switzerland. And suddenly we see a small shift in usage. But the peak shift was again not driven by home office, but really more people sitting in front of TV during the nights because all the restaurants and bars were closed. And we have seen about a 10% increase of peak usage, moving from 2.4 to 2.7 terabits per second in the evening. The peak obviously also shifted around lunch. So that's the move you can see from 2 to 4. So more people at home watching mainly TV or YouTube or Netflix, sort of really streaming video, which is the main driver. And then this is something you can also observe the peak number 5. So you can see that peak load diminished slightly after March 23rd. That's when Netflix changed their compression algorithm and delivery. And they reduced the usage of, or they increased compression, which resulted of a slightly lower peak usage in the evening on our side. So really interesting to see that actually the networks were absolutely capable of coping with the increased load, especially home office work is actually, for at least in Switzerland, not really a problem because our main load is driven by TV usage, which is happening in the evening. When you compare this, for example, to telephony workload, so really minutes phoned, the peak usage is 11 o'clock in the morning when most people seem to be doing phone calls in the offices, which is really completely different to actually peak data usage, which is in the evening. So, but nevertheless, we also put in place many new measures on our side to really double checking and making sure that network is really running 24/7 without interruption. So we put in place a more rigorous change regime, which is still in force currently. We reinforced the monitoring of the network, obviously, to really make sure that even smaller outages or local outages in villages are detected so that we can intervene immediately to allow people to have uninterrupted home office or homeschooling around the data. Because now people obviously are also more aware of, let's say, small interruptions, maybe for 1 minute or 5 minutes at home, which they didn't notice before because they were working or were outside of their home. And then we continue our work on DevOps, which is something that we are working on since many years, which allows us to gradually improve our network quality approach. We also helped many enterprises with bandwidth increases for free. We waived roaming tariffs for tourists that were stuck in the country, and many more things that I think showed also that we, as a company, really wanted to take our responsibility during this crisis, also from a social standpoint. I think it is safe to say that COVID-19 crisis has shown us that how important our networks and services are. We can say that, or I believe that telecommunications providers are truly system critical at the same level as healthcare providers or water supplies or electricity utilities. If there is no network, there is no more life, no more connectivity for either the companies or also people living in this country. So let's have a look at how this looks at in Switzerland in terms of network connectivity. So Switzerland has an excellent telecommunications infrastructure, which is driven completely by market dynamics. So there are no subsidies whatsoever in Switzerland for building out network, neither wireline nor mobile networks. but we have a very dynamic competition driven by, on the one side, the telecom providers, and on the other side by the cable providers, leading to the world's highest per capita investment in telecommunications infrastructure. And you can see that before I mentioned that around 75% of Swisscom customers have at least 100 megabits or above. Throughout the country, this is over 98%, and the remaining is mainly access provided by cable providers, where we are not yet offering the same speeds over our older copper lines. What is also interesting, I think, to point out is that you can see in the third pillar that also the network construction is not only focused around the large cities, but also in rural areas where nearly 90% of rural Switzerland has at least 30 megabits connectivity, which is enough for a household to consume Spotify, Netflix, watch TV, and participate or work out of home without any issues. So I think this leads us to the conclusion that we strongly believe that the infrastructure market works. If you have a market, let's say, that allows for competition, you will see investment in network infrastructure, both on the wireline and also on the wireless side. I think this creates innovation, and the networks are built where there is a real need for higher speeds. On the other thing, or on the other side, I would also like to point out that Switzerland, or Swisscom, is really aware of its social responsibility. So we take extra care of not only rolling out networks in the dense cities, but also rolling out wireline connectivity in all rural areas, in the mountainous areas, in suburban or agglomeration areas, to really try to connect the whole country at a similar speed and avoid sort of a digital divide between cities and the rural landscape. And obviously, as I mentioned before, providing the legal requirement of 10 megabit wherever possible. That's an important aspect of the wireline connectivity as well. Because if we look forward, I have already shown you on the graph we have seen for March 2020 that the main driver, at least in Switzerland, is really video, being it YouTube, Netflix, or our own video platform. That this is the main data usage driver today. And we strongly believe that this will continue with the arrival of 8K video and obviously the push of AR, VR at some point in the future. We strongly believe that the data usage will strongly increase in the years to come. And as telecommunication providers, we need to prepare for this setting or increase of data usage and continue to invest in wireline connectivity, both in the core area, but obviously also on the access side, and really making sure that all homes and businesses are connected appropriately. And for this, we have devised our what we call the best net strategy. So we have three objectives. We want to provide best performance, best reliability, and best coverage to our customers, both on wireline and as on wireless. So on the wireline side, we continue our fiber rollout. So we want to connect 60% of the country with at least 10 gigabit services, maybe more if technology on the XGS-PON side allows for it. And then the remaining of the country, so around 35 to 40%, will be connected through G.fast with at least 300 megabits per second, really allowing sort of the full digitization of the country. At the same time, we continue to invest in our mobile rollout, 4G and 5G mainly. And what I would also like to point out is that we also look quite carefully at simplifying our network and reducing the number of technologies to make it easier to operate. So we are looking at copper phase out. We are currently turning off the 2G network, which will be turned off in 2 months, and continuously simplifying the network, allowing us to operate it in a better way, more reliable way, and focus our investments in the new areas. Sort of running around investments, we invest around 20% of our revenues in CapEx. So that's about 1.6 billion per year that we invest both on the network side and the IT side to allow us to continue to roll out this plan, because we strongly believe that network is really the key differentiator of a communication provider, and we need to take extra care to be able to have the best network possible. So in summary, I would like to conclude my speech. I think there are 3 points. Telecommunication providers play a key role and are the lifeline of society, really enabling the society to continue to function both on the business but also on the social side. I believe that we can say that telecoms have delivered on this promise and continue to deliver on this promise. And third, as I mentioned, it is absolutely key from my perspective to continue to invest in network improvement, not only on the access side, connecting the homes, but also on the core and metro side to be able to cope with the traffic increase that we expect in the future. With this, I am at the end of my contract, and Annie, I suggest we open for Q&A.
Okay, well, one of the penalties of going first, I suppose, is people generally are still a little bit shy. But I have some questions that I would like to ask, if I may, Christoph. Thank you. That's a really interesting presentation you gave there. One of the things regarding infrastructure, I think when we think about Switzerland, we tend to think of a very mountainous country. Well, look at your backdrop. I mean, you know, and yet the fact that the connectivity is so high is quite astonishing. I mean, is that just because you started early and with a complete commitment and you knew there was never going to be any subsidies?
Well, I think we started rollout or improving the network over 10 years ago. And the initial build was about 1/3 of fiber, which was mainly focused on the cities, so connecting all the large cities to the fiber network. And then we embarked on the FTTS rollout. So we basically made a public promise to the country where we said that we will connect every municipality to our fiber network in the country and connect 90% of the homes to our FTTS network. So delivering them 80 megabits at least or above. So we have only a very few number, and so we will deliver on this commitment by end of 21. So end of this year, we will have finished this rollout. And this is why now we embark like on the second piece of fiber rollout, upgrading sort of or overbuilding some of the FTTS with FTTH. So if you look at on a country level, there are not so many homes left that have less connectivity, that are not yet connected to FTTS. So these so about 7% of homes remaining, and these are connected mainly with VDSL and some with ADSL. And in very remote areas, let's say some mountain huts that we have to connect, they are typically connected with satellite connection to deliver the 10 megabits, where we cannot, you know, the sort of there is no possibility to actually bring a wireless connectivity.
Okay, so now our audience is obviously the coffee's kicked in, so we're getting some questions. So one of member of our audience asks, what are your plans for deploying ORAN?
So ORAN, I think, is a very interesting topic. At the moment, we are more in an observer role, and we really appreciate this initiative because it creates more competition in the market. In terms of connectivity or equipment provider, which I think is important, especially if you look at what's going on geopolitically at the moment. But on the other side, we are really focused on delivering the best mobile network in Europe, or sort of in the top mobile networks in the world. So I believe that ORAN is not yet capable of delivering on this promise. And this is why for the moment, we are not deploying any type of ORAN equipment in our network, but we have a very strong partnership with Ericsson going on since many years. And I think if I look at all the mobile sort of tests we are winning, I think we can say that we are delivering on this ambition. But happy to see maybe in the future ORAN can do the same. We will see. But I think at the moment the ecosystem is not yet ready, and there is a lot of integration work required that you have to do, which we want to leave to Ericsson at the moment. And we are really happy about that partnership at this time.
Okay, thank you. And another member of our audience is asking, did you need to significantly add capacity in response to the increased demand of lockdown, or was there enough headroom there to work with?
We had enough headroom. I mean, obviously, in some areas we had to increase slightly our capacity. So we are measuring headroom on the core side, but also on the metro side, all the aggregation points. And as soon as we hit certain thresholds, typically around 80%, we start increasing capacity. And this is sort of an ongoing process that we have in place, measuring the network from the access side to the core side. So that we never run into any sort of capacity issues. And but during the time, I think we had to upgrade one or two metro locations to the next level, but nothing really sort of significant.
Okay. And another question is, how far is Swisscom considering selling towers or owned fibre networks? And of course, this is a reference to so many, especially the larger groups, although not exclusively, selling towers or putting them into separate entities. And also, I thought that Friday's announcement by Orange that it would sell part of its rural fibre assets was quite surprising, and I think would have been unimaginable until fairly recently. So is Swisscom thinking of going down that route with fibre or towers?
Well, the answer is very clear, absolutely not. I think as long as we can finance our capex without selling our key assets, we will continue to do so. And at the moment, we don't see any reasons for selling either towers or our fiber network, because we believe this is one of our key assets we need to own to create competitive advantage on the market. And but you know, I mean, I can understand that in other countries you come to different conclusions, or if you're in a different situation, you might. It is probably a good way forward for us. In the position we are not considering this option at the moment.
Okay. And how ready are you to assist other nations to use 5G technology, for example, for IoT at all levels, and other facilities for economic and social sectors? So I guess that's how interconnected you are with other countries' 5G, I suppose, and how interoperable, at what level of interoperability?
Well, I mean, I think, the 5G standard is by definition interoperable. So our IoT network, I mean, we follow the standards of 4G and 5G in terms of IoT. And so all the IoT devices that work in another country on a 4G, 5G network work in Switzerland. What we do in terms of international cooperation, I mean, we work a lot with other operators, or we do a lot of exchanges with other operators, discussing ideas or challenges, or how we can roll out faster, how we can leverage the 5G networks in better ways. So I think this is the way we assist other operators, or we also or profit from these exchanges with other operators. But we don't engage sort of on a country level assistance, or I mean, this is not really our, I would say, turf.
I think maybe it's more about enabling other operators to extend their footprint via your infrastructure, because I think that's what lots of, especially as IoT develops, that's probably what's going to be needed, is to be able to cross borders easily.
Well, I think, I mean, we have roaming agreements or agreements to use our networks vice versa with most of the operators worldwide. So I think interoperating on the IoT side shouldn't be an issue, actually.
Okay, another question for you is, what role is big data playing at Swisscom to improve customer experience or targeted advertising?
I strongly believe that big data, or sort of the whole machine learning, data analytics, AI piece is one of the key topics that operators need to invest in for the future. So we are investing heavily in this area, and we use it on multiple fronts. I would say we use it directly in our products. For example, our TV product has certain AI components, or which are driven on data analytics. Such as film recommendations, for example, similar to the Netflix algorithm, sort of what do you want to watch next. We use it in our chatbot facilities on customer call center. We use it in the IVR facility to drive call volumes or better drive it to the right spot. We use a lot of analytics internally to optimize processes, improve customer experience, or to do targeted advertising, sort of increase upselling, conversion rates, etc. So I think this is really a key area you need to master and invest in as an operator, and because it generates a lot of value on many different fronts for your customers.
And how much are you using automation in your network now? Which kind of builds on from the AI, really, or are you using that in operations, I guess?
Well, we are heavily automating everything we can, I would say, as much as possible. On the network side, I think this is what I mentioned also with the simplification of the network. In some areas, we still have quite old technologies, or also on the, if I look at the IP side in our core and metro networks, we have still some older IP networks remaining, which are sort of quite hard to automate and improve. So we have launched a new initiative to completely replace all those older platforms with new IP platforms, which are built from the beginning in a completely automated, fully monitored way to allow us to operate the network in a much more efficient way. So I think this is important, but we still have a way to go on that side.
And what technologies are you using for end-to-end monitoring to ensure digital experience? Another question from our audience.
So end-to-end monitoring is one of the important topics we are working on right now. So I think there are many, different aspects of end-to-end monitoring. One is really the let's say our process side monitoring, so monitoring the important fulfillment processes. So on that side, we built our own custom tools built on our big data lakes. So all the platforms have been instrumented, injecting data in our lakes infrastructure so that we can really correlate what is going on the process side on the fulfillment. And this has been built in-house. And then we are basically taking the same approach on the network side, where we are now injecting all the network events in our data lake, and we start to correlate basically from the customer contract, the product he has bought, all the physical equipment that is required to deliver it, from the network equipment, IT infrastructure equipment, virtualization infrastructures, through to all telecom platforms, so that we can really say that, okay, if this network equipment goes down, which customer is impacted, which service, in which location, which is something we have been impossible to do before. And I think this is a big investment, but I am convinced that it's really worth it, and it will really drastically improve customer experience, and especially our time to resolve incidents, because we understand in a much faster way what is going on.
And is the next step to move towards a more predictive approach, so that you're not fixing but avoiding?
That would be sort of the goal, but at the moment we are already concerned about or looking into getting all the data into the lake, which is already, let's say, a task in itself. We have so many data sources, and then trying to correlate these sources together, which is also which is quite application specific or use case specific in many cases. And this is also why it's quite hard. We looked at, there are many monitoring tools you can buy, but the whole correlation work that needs to happen, how the data is connected together, you have to do this yourself, because there is no tool, at least to my knowledge, no tool on the market that does that for you. But this is where the real value actually lies. But yeah, still a lot of work to do. And then hopefully we can go more into predictive and actually do the work before something happens.
How far would you say the predictive phase is? 2 years, 5 years?
Well, on some areas we already use predictive today. So if you look at, for example, predicting, memory consumption on IT infrastructure platforms, or disk utilization on our IT storage facility. So on that side, we already use predictive monitoring to actually predict when will the storage be full, to actually increase storage before it runs full. So, but that's quite easy. I think predictive in other areas like network are much harder. So on that side, I would, maybe we are more focused on, every year we try to add something more, and but it's quite difficult to say when we will be fully predictive, but probably still many years to come.
Christoph, thank you for a really interesting presentation and some very frank answers to the questions. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me, and wish you a great conference today.
Thank you.